Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are here on the web stage at Programmers Week. For those of you who recently joined, I'm Anna Bandas, and I'm a Senior Web Community Manager at Cognizant Softvision. I'm really excited to be here today and moderate our first talks from our colleagues from the web community. They have prepared for you some very interesting insights to fully enjoy our web day. This year, at the 7th edition of Programmers Week, we aim to go beyond and offer you experiences to remember by pushing the limits of technology and innovation. Our next speaker is Mihai Ureche, our community lead in web community in Bucharest. Mihai is no stranger to the web stages of different conferences here in Romania. And he is a returning speaker, actually, here at Programmers Week, and we are very happy to have him here again with us. Today, he is going to share with us all the cool insights about domain-driven design and how we can use it into an Angular application. Mihai, glad to have you back here as a speaker this year, so the stage is yours.
Thank you, Anna. I'm glad to be here and as a second edition here as a speaker at Programmers Week 2021. And yeah, like you said, today I want to talk about domain-driven design and how we can use it in the front-end applications. But first, I want to welcome everybody, to say welcome to everybody to the 4th day of Programmers Week. And as you already saw from today's talks, we are talking about web and mobile. And my presentation today is about domain-driven design. But of course, probably some of you use domain-driven design, and you maybe use it on the backend applications. Okay, but how we can bring the benefits of domain-driven design on the front-end side? Why we should not use the same benefits? Why we should not bring the same structure and the same, let's say, tools that domain-driven design put us here, and why we should not use this on the front-end side? But before starting to discuss about domain-driven design, I want to tell you a couple of things about me. At this moment, as Anna said, I'm working as community lead at Cognizant Softvision. And this gave me the opportunity to share my knowledge and to help my colleagues improve their skills, and also to learn something new from them every day. And of course, this helped me also to improve and to learn more and more on every day. And by having these amazing colleagues, like you saw earlier, Adina talked about what it means to be a developer, what is the path. And not only the technical parts are important here, but also the communication and the soft skills are an important skills that we need to develop in the software development. And because in the end, we are working in the teams. If you are working alone, it's okay. But if you are working alone, you will. It's a proverb that is saying, if you are working alone, you will go, if you want to go fast, work alone. If you want to go farther, work in a team, work together. And usually this is what I'm thinking, because working in a team will help us a lot and will help us to share the knowledge between us and to gain knowledge from each other. As a historic here, I have around 13 years of experience in web development. And even in this moment, I'm working as a front-end developer on my current project. My journey started with PHP. But of course, as some of you know, working as PHP developer 13 years ago means that you should be able to write also HTML, CSS, and even JavaScript code. Of course, the JavaScript code that I wrote 13 years ago was nothing like the JavaScript code that I'm writing today. I use JavaScript just to make some animation or to, I don't know, move some elements on the page from one side to another side, or I use jQuery to do some Ajax code, but that was all. It didn't look like the code that I am writing today. But that's enough about me. Let's see what my presentation from today has. So my presentation from today is split in 3 big sections. First, I will give you some high-level information about what domain-driven design is, and what are the benefits of using it, and of course how you can start your own project with domain-driven design. After that, we'll go a little deeper and talk about building blocks from domain-driven design, and we talk about what are the entities, what are the objects, and what are the blocks that can help us build this structure and have this pattern. In the end, the domain-driven design is a pattern. It's a process pattern. It's a pattern that it helps us to develop a good project, good software project, and good software. And of course, there are other benefits which I will tell you later. And at the end, I will show you how I structure my code in order to follow the DDD principle in an application with Angular. Because like I said, okay, domain-driven design, I saw domain-driven design that it's used on the backend side, but we can use it on the front-end side. I saw some structure defined by others on the front-end side. It doesn't look like the backend side because, of course, on the front-end side, we don't have all these layers that we have on the backend side. But definitely we can benefit of domain-driven design and his advantages. Okay, let's see what domain-driven design is and how this can help us in the development on the front-end side. For those of you who don't know what domain-driven design is, the definition is that it's a pattern or a concept that will help us to write better code and which will make sense from the business point of view. And what I want to say makes sense from the business point of view is that will help us to write the code based on the discussion that we have with the domain experts, based on the discussion that we have with the people from the business team, and writing code using the words and the language. And we'll talk about the language later. I will show you what language we're using in domain-driven design. Having the same language and writing the code using the same language that we are talking with the business team will help us understand the business, and also for the business team to understand what we are doing there, why we are writing the code in such way. And of course, domain-driven design has some core principles. And the first core principle is that we're focusing on the core domain and domain logic. The second principle is that can be used to design a complex application by splitting it in different domains. The last principle is saying that having a constant collaboration between the technical team and domain experts will help to define a model of the domain. And I'll talk later about what a model is and what a domain is. But these are the core principles of domain-driven design. So basically, we're focusing on a domain. We're focusing on a specific domain. We're taking care of a specific domain in our application. And the second principle is saying, okay, to be used in complex applications. We'll see what are the disadvantages of the domain-driven design later. But keep in mind that usually the domain-driven design is used in enterprise applications, in big applications. Okay, now let's see what are the common terminologies using domain-driven design. Okay, when we hear the word context, we should think about a specific case where a word makes sense. For example, if we are talking about an e-commerce application, we can say that a context in our application is the ordering process or the catalog. Of course, a context it's something tied to a specific case. Another term, like I told you earlier, is this model. And okay, what is the model? A model is a system of abstractions that describes selected aspects of a domain and which can be used to solve problems related to that domain. About the model is defined by the development team together with the domain experts, with the people that has the knowledge about the domain, about the business. Both of these teams need to be involved in the process. You cannot have the development team alone to define the model. You cannot leave the development team to define this model alone because the development team doesn't have the business knowledge. That's why these experts and these people, that the business team, it's playing a big role in the software development in the end. Because of course, we as web development, as developers, not web developers, but as developers in general, we are gaining a lot of knowledge from other domains. When we are working with, I don't know, in an automotive project, when we are working in a healthcare project, in a banking project, we are gaining some knowledge about that domain, of course. But we cannot say that we are domain experts because we don't know everything. That's why we need the help of business team in the end. And another term used in the DDD is the ubiquitous language. So what ubiquitous language is the common language that will be understood by the development team, but also by the domain experts. So like I said, at the beginning, the development team and the domain experts, the business team, again, they need to sit on the same table and discuss about the model, about the ubiquitous language. They need to decide what language to use when they will communicate. And when they are sharing different information between them, they need to know what they are talking about. We cannot say, okay, as a developer, I cannot go to the business team and I say, okay, I have this class with these properties. This property is private, and I don't know exactly what to do. I cannot say that to a business team, to a business person, because he will not understand what I'm saying. But if I'm going and explain what I want to do using the ubiquitous language that we define at the beginning, he most definitely will understand. And the last term that we have here in the domain-driven design is the bounded context. And the bounded context is typically a subsystem or the work of a specific team. If we take the example from earlier with the ordering process as a context, a bounded context here could be the shopping cart or my orders. Now, we are talking about context as a section, or I don't know, let's say a section from the application or a process in the application, not specifically a section, but a process in the application, like ordering. But a bounded context can be a section or can be a specific case in our application, like shopping cart. Shopping cart is a bounded context. You have different elements in that shopping cart, and same my order section in an e-commerce platform. That my orders, it's a specific section with his own specific function, with his own specific processes, and you need to take care of each section one by one. This is what domain-driven design is saying, that you should take care of each domain one by one, or even the same. You can work with the same team with multiple domains, or use different teams. And of course, this reminds me about my presentation from last year with the micro frontends, where micro frontends are defined in such a way that you can use different teams. Different teams can implement different micro frontends. It's the same with the domain. In the end, a micro frontend, or if I'm talking about micro frontend, microservices, this we're talking about the domain, and the domain is part of this pattern, domain-driven design. Okay, we saw what are the common terms, but let's see what are the benefits and which are the key benefits of using domain-driven design. The first key benefit is the fact that by creating a common model It will help the development team and business team to use that model to communicate about requirements, about requirements, data entities, and process model, like I told you on the previous slide. This will end up having an easy communication, and will end up on having a better communication between the business team and the development team. The second benefit refers to the fact that the DDD will give to the developers the principles and patterns to solve technical problems, but also business problems. And here I'm talking about that ubiquitous language. Of course, we are writing classes, we are writing code in the end. Either we are talking about classes, either we are talking about all the object-oriented programming, either we are talking about procedural programming. It doesn't matter. But using the patterns to solve the technical problems, which are in the DDD, will help us. But the same thing, using the ubiquitous language and the model and everything that we define together with the business team at the beginning of the project, it will help us to solve the business problems. Another key benefit here is that using DDD will help us to reduce the risk of misunderstanding by having the requirements explained from a domain perspective. And here the ubiquitous language it's playing the biggest role, having that language defined. And I'm putting an accent of that language because the communication, when we are developing a project, when we are developing a software, I think the most time consuming is the communication between either different teams, either between development team and business team. This communication at some point will take a lot of time, and it will take a lot of time because the development team it's talking a language, and business team is talking another language. Having a common language will help these two teams to communicate better and to improve their communication, and to not spend so much time in understanding each other. And the last benefit is that the team will work better together, since everyone is using the same terminology. So here, I'm not talking only about the communication between the development team and the business team. I'm talking about the inner communication between the members of the development team. Having the language, the same language, that ubiquitous language, they could share their thoughts about different things from the domain and from the application. So this ubiquitous language, it doesn't have only the communication between the development team and business team. It also has the communication from the team, from the development team, or anyway, it will have the communication between the developers and the QA people, because I know usually the communication between developers and QA people, it's a struggle, and having this common language, it will help us. Okay, we saw the key benefits, but besides the benefits, the DDD is coming with some disadvantages also. And one of the problems of introducing DDD in software development is the effort required to adopt this approach and the time spent by the team to understand the benefits of it. It's not something easy. It's not something that, I will, let's say that I will allocate 1 hour today and I will look over the domain-driven design, and starting from tomorrow, I'll start to implement it. No, it's not something easy. You need to spend some time to understand the benefits, to understand the structure, to understand why you should use DDD in your project, or even if DDD it's suitable for your project. In some cases, maybe DDD is not suitable for your project. No, don't use it. If it's not suitable for your project, don't spend time to define the structure from DDD. Just develop your application as you are developing until now. Another disadvantage, like I said, is that we need people that have good knowledge about the domain and who could explain the business very well. And usually, that means that we need to bring, even if we have a different business team, But usually we are bringing these business people in the team. They are part of the team. And when I'm saying, okay, development team, business team, no, we are a cross-functional team. And that means, okay, we have developers, we have QA people, we have business people in the team. But having a good domain expert in the team, those domain experts are not cheap. So that will increase the cost of the project. Having another person in the team, that will increase the team, that will increase the communication between. Having this DDD implemented, like I said, is time consuming. It's time consuming because you need to learn, you need to define that language, you need to define the model, all this kind of stuff. And that will increase the cost of a project. So this will need to be took in consideration when you decide to use DDD. Another downside is that DDD is more suitable for big applications, like I said, where you need to solve complex problems. If you have a small application, don't use DDD. Don't spend this time to structure your code, to structure everything just for the sake of using DDD. Don't do that, because DDD implies to spend time in, like I said, in defining the ubiquitous language, in defining the model, in finding the domain experts that will help you with the business information, all this kind of stuff. For example, if you are developing let's say a blog, you don't need a business expert. Of course, you can just implement a blog. I think most of us at some point develop a blog. And of course, now with all these platforms like WordPress, Joomla, or any other platforms, Drupal, even Drupal, all these platforms can help us have the blog up and running in maybe not saying hours, if you are using WordPress, in minutes, because it's very quickly to set up a blog with WordPress. So this is what I'm saying. Don't use DDD where it's not needed. And the last disadvantage is that a high level of isolation and encapsulation in the domain model may present a challenge for business domain experts. So be careful when you are choosing to use DDD. Okay, we discussed about the key benefits. We saw what are the terms using DDD. We saw what are the disadvantages of using domain-driven design. Okay, but now let's see what are the blocks used to build this structure. So on this slide, we have this representation, and this representation in DDD is called onion representation, because the layers are represented as the layers of an onion. For example, if you are sectioning an onion, you will see that has different layers. One second. Yeah. So as you see, our representation is looking like an onion, and here we have multiple layers. And let's start with the first layer, the layer from the center, the core layer. The core layer contains domain objects like entities, value objects, custom types, and aggregates. The second layer, the domain layer, contains all the business logic. We saw earlier when I said that the core principles is focused on the domain logic and the business and domain logic on the domain and domain logic. So the domain layer contains the business logic, and here every time we are defining a class or method, we should take in consideration the ubiquitous language of the domain, the ubiquitous language that we define together with domain experts. The API layer contains methods which can be used to access core and domain objects. And of course, here, if we are looking on a backend application, the API layer usually are the endpoints, the function that define the endpoints, and those endpoints can access different entities and different value objects. Of course, if we are going further and we are talking about CQRS, where we have the command and the queries, this structure will become more complex and more complex, adding different layers on top of it. And The infrastructure layer, this last area from this representation, the infrastructure layer, it's usually a bridge between domain object and databases or third-party services. You don't need to use a database. If you are developing an application which doesn't have its own database, the infrastructure layer could be your link with another service. Yeah, see, you want an application that will get the data, I know, from Facebook, Twitter, Google, or any other third-party service. Here, the communication with those services and of course with databases will stay in the infrastructure layer. Okay, now let's see what are the most used blocks from DDD. Entity. So the entity is an object which usually has an ID, but has an ID as a property. This is what I want to say here. But it's not mandatory to have that property called ID. You can have an identifier created from a group of properties. So in the end, your identity of the entity, it can be either an ID, either a combination of some properties. And what that means, it means that in the process, the identity of this entity, of a specific entity, will not change. You can change only the properties of that entity. For example, let's think about a person. We have a name. We have our name. Our name maybe it's not unique, but the name together with social security ID, this combination, name and plus social security ID, or even the social security ID, it's an identifier for us. You know, if you are changing the social security ID, you are not the same person. Or if you are changing the name, you are not the same person in the end. Of course, we can change the address. We can change other properties, but not these identifiers, because these are the identifiers that identify me as a person. And this is what's happening in software development, and this is happening in DDD with an entity. Okay, another block that we are using here is the value object. The value object is an immutable object that has attributes, but no distinct identity. So if you want to build, or if you need an object which doesn't have an identity, use a value object. This value object, and like I said, value object is an immutable object. Every time you are changing something in the value object, that means that you need to generate a new object. Value object will not update its property, but the value object will change altogether. You need to generate a new object every time you are changing some values of it. The domain event. Domain event it's an object that is used to record a discrete event related to the model activity within the system. A domain event is only created for events types which the domain experts care about. Don't create domain events for, let's say, technical events. Like if we're talking about frontend, on click, on change, submit. These are events, browser events. These are not domain events. Domain events are referring to the business logic and to what the domain experts expected. The aggregate is like a collection of entities and value objects with defined boundaries around the group. Rather than allowing every single entity or value object to perform all actions on its own, we can use the aggregate to receive the instructions. Okay, repositories. When we are talking about repositories in domain-driven design, we're not talking about the version control repositories. I know that maybe some of you, when you heard the word repositories, you are thinking about Git repositories or these kind of things. But in DDD, we are not talking about those repositories. The repository from domain-driven design, it's a service that uses a global interface which helps us to extract, insert, or change data into the database, or like I said, another third-party services. And factories. Okay, probably most of you are familiar with the factory pattern. Domain-driven design suggests the use of factory when you need to create complex objects and aggregates. That will ensure that the client has no knowledge of inner workings of object manipulation. So this will use these factories to create different entities, different aggregates, and you will not know how that will work. Okay, that's all about the theoretical part. Now I want to show you the structure that I define on an Angular application. What I will show you next, it's a structure that let's say you'll not find it anywhere else, because it's a structure that I define based on my knowledge about domain design, based on my knowledge in this subject, and of course based on the knowledge that I gain in my current project, where we are using domain-driven design. We're using domain-driven design on the backend side. On the front-end side, we started to use some of these concepts. We are not yet at, let's say, 100% domain-driven design on the front-end side, but we're on that path of starting to structure our code to use the same concept as the backend. Okay, let me switch this to my editor. I hope you guys can see my editor. So what I have here, it's basically a standard Angular application. If you look here, it's a Angular 12 application. Added some extra libraries like FontAwesome, FNS, PrimeFlex, Prime Icons, and PrimeNG. This PrimeNG is a library with components. I didn't want to create my own components, so I used this library to basically use the components directly. And let me show you how the application is looking. So the application is like this. I have the home menu and the movies menu, where I have some movies displayed. But let's go back to the code. Here in the source folder, like I said, I try to structure my code following the domain-driven design pattern and following the structure that was defined in domain-driven design. Of course, on the front-end side, we cannot use all of them because most of, let's say not most of them, but some of the concepts and some of the objects, some of the blocks, I say blocks, some of the blocks were specifically designed for backend, like repositories. Those repositories are specific for a connection between, I don't know, our application and database or third-party services. We can have something similar on the front-end side, but I added that in the infrastructure. So in the source folder, I have let's say the standard folders from Angular application, the app folder, assets, and environment. But what else I have here? I have the core layer. You know, if you remember the Onion presentation, we had 4 layers there: core, domain, API, and infrastructure. Here I have the core, and I told you that the core contains entities, value object, custom types, aggregates. And this is what I have here. I added the aggregates, entities, and value object, and I will go through them one by one. And I have the infrastructure part. And here in the infrastructure part, actually, let me start with the infrastructure part, because the infrastructure part is the bottom of our application. See, everything is starting from here. Of course, in Angular, the components are loaded first, but anyway, if we are looking over the layers, the infrastructure is the biggest layer in our representation. So in the infrastructure, what I have here, I have these DTOs. It's calling data transfer objects. So I have a base DTO, which has an ID. and I'm using this for of course for object that has an ID. And in the movie DTO, like you see, I have the movie DTO, which extend the base DTO. So in that moment, I have, by the way, this is Typescript. For those of you who didn't work with Angular, Angular is coming by default with Typescript. So it's not JavaScript vanilla. That's why we have interfaces. Where you will see that we have classes and all this kind of stuff. Of course, classes now are available on JavaScript, but just I want to mention that it's TypeScript, as you probably saw on the extension of the files. But the movie DTO contains title, overview, language, original language, poster date, release date. These are the properties that are coming from the service that I'm calling to get the movies. And like I show you here, this is the list of movies. And besides this movie DTO, I have another DTO, production country and spoken language. These are some arrays that are coming in my movie object. So I define this separately. In case I need to use this in another place, I don't want to define this in line here. Just want to have this type. In the end, either if you can use, I use interface, but you can use the types to define these DTOs. And the movie response, this is the response that it's coming from the service. And of course, in the infrastructure layer, I have also the service. And here I have the movie service. And let's say movie service contains two methods. They get popular movies. So this is what I'm displaying here. I'm displaying the popular movies, not all the movies. And I'm using the HTTP client from Angular to get the movies. Here I'm putting the movie response. And what I'm doing here, basically, if you look here, I'm transforming each movie object from a DTO to an entity. And here I have this movie entity. And I'm calling this function called send entity from DTO. I'm not using the constructor of an entity to create the object. I'm not sending the information from the DTO directly in the constructor of the entity, because I know in the future maybe I want to use this entity when I'm creating a movie. When I have a form for a movie, I don't want to use a different class. I don't want to use a different model. I just use this. I just want to use this entity. And by not adding those directly in the constructor, of course, when I'm using in the form, maybe I can give some default values directly in the constructor, but that will increase the code, and the code will not look so clean. So I'm using another function here called set entity from DTO. And this is what I'm doing here. Basically, I'm setting the entity from DTO, and I'm just sending them a movie entity back to. In this constant movies, I have a type iMovie, which is basically contains the movies entities. So here I have I have each movie object, each movie DTO object, each movie that is coming from the service. The DTO is converted to the entity. And I'm using this movies aggregate. And why I'm using an aggregate? Because an aggregate, like I told you, it's a group of entities, value objects, or different properties. And here I have the list of movies, but also the number of results that is coming from the service. In the entity, I'm not adding in the entity this total results or anything like that. I'm using the aggregates. The aggregates is the part where we have this group of informations. And the other API here, the other let's say function from this service is get movie. Here I'm doing the same thing. I'm getting the difference is, see, here I'm using this aggregate because I'm getting the list of a list of movies, but here I'm using directly an entity. I don't want to use any pagination or something like that. I'm getting the information only of one entity, one movie, and I'm transferring the information that is coming from the service into an entity. So now let's see how that entity is looking like. If you look on the entities folder, we have this base entity. This base entity contains the ID. Like I told you at the beginning, each entity will need to have an identifier. Here I choose to use the ID as identifier. Of course, you can use a group of properties as identifier of that entity. Maybe you don't need this base entity. This base entity is just the purpose to have the ID, to have the ID added there every time you are defining an entity. But like I said, you can use a group of properties as identifier. And if we are going further and look on the movie entity, we have this interface that I used in the service for a movie. And here I have the movie entity with his properties and the constructor. Here I'm in the constructor, I'm just putting some default values because I'm using strict mode in Angular. And by using strict mode, I need to have this, each property will need to have a default value. And here in the set entity from DTO, basically I'm putting the information that is coming from service into the entity. And of course, what I have here is something. See, maybe you notice that I have I production country, I spoken language, and here I have a new production country, new spoken language. And if you look here, I'm creating this every time. So basically, if I can use this function, for example, to replace the how it's calling the entity, but because I'm using the ID here, I should create maybe another function which doesn't replace the ID. But here, if you see here, I'm creating every time a separate object. This production country, and these production countries are value objects. A production country, because it's calling production country, doesn't make sense without a movie entity. You know, we can have production country without saying, okay, production country of what? Production country of that movie, of a specific entity. So that's why here we don't have any identifier. The identifier, let's think about a little bit. Value object as identifier, it means combination of all properties. If you change one of the property of a value object, that means that you change his identity. So this is what I have here. I have a value object, and same here for spoken language. It's another value object. They are the same. They are looking the same. You can have maybe instead of having different value object, you can have only one value object. I don't know, maybe a general value object. But for the purpose of ubiquitous language, like I said earlier, and for the purpose of understanding what we are writing here, and to explain to the business team, I choose to have two different value objects. Now let's see the movies, the aggregate. This is the movie aggregate. The movie aggregate contains the movies and total records. This is everything that contains in this moment. Of course, it can be a complex object. Like I said, you can have different values here, different actions, different things. If you want to, let's say, on the list page, you want to do the sort of the movies, you should do it in the movies aggregate. Or if you want to, I don't know, change the order of a movie, you should do it here, not in the entity. And if we go in the app, here we'll see we have the modules. I have the modules, I have the components. Here I have the home component. Basically, the home component it's this image. This is an image with the logo and some information from the official website, Programmers Week, and the menu component, which I'm using here. I'm using the PrimeNG. This is where I use the PrimeNG, basically to have this components direct here. So here in the movies, I have the movies module, I have the routes, I have the base route and the ID route. And in the component, I have this movies component where I'm using the movie service to get the popular movies. And here I have this movies aggregate. And from the movies aggregate, see, I'm the get popular movies. If you remember, it will return a movies aggregate. So from the movies aggregate, I'm getting the movies, the total record, and of course, this is a property from this component, just to show that loading icon. And here, this function double movies I'm using to basically when I'm switching the pages. Let's see very quickly what we have here. So here, if I switch to the next page, I have this loading, and load movies, that function load movies, it's called when I'm switching the pages. And I have another point here. It's okay. This is the single. Here I'm displaying a single movie, which is information. Here I'm using the value object, and this is how the movie is looking. I have this component, engine init. I'm getting the ID, and using the service, I'm just getting the movie information. And movie here is the movie entity, and I'm just using the movie entity to display the information here: the poster, title, overview, product, production countries, spoken language. And of course, I have another component here called movie card, where I'm using the PrimeNG component to display one second, each card from here. And this card I'm using here, I'll put movie card to display the information. Yeah, so basically this is the structure that I envision for frontend. It's a small structure. I'm not using everything from DDD here, but most of let's say common blocks and the principal blocks are here: the entities, value object, aggregates, and of course this infrastructure. This infrastructure is something that the DTO it's usually used in the backend application. The DTO is used in the API layer, because the DTO is sent to the clients. Okay. I also have this page with references if you like to read more, or if you want to read more about domain-driven design, or to see other structure on the front-end side. And here, domain-driven design with Angular, this course from ProSite. You can go over it. It's a presentation, and you can see another structure of using domain-driven design on the front-end side. And of course, here you have the link to my my demo code. You can download it from there, run it locally, and play it with it. Now, questions. Let's see if we have questions. Anna, can you help me with those questions?
Yes, Mihai. Well, we don't really have any specific questions, but we do have some comments regarding the topic. And I would like to read them for the audience. So Bogdan is sharing with us his thoughts. So in his opinion, understanding the business by the developer increases the communication efficiency, and understanding the business is strongly related to understanding the end client and their wishes. We need, as software engineers or architect level, related to the previous talk, we definitely need to care and understand very well the business goals in order to have a great product. And I was wondering, Mihai, in your previous experience, so before you discovered the domain-driven designs, if you think at your previous projects, do you think of a specific one where maybe you could have applied this methodology and maybe or chain of thought, and maybe you have had, I don't know, faster results or better results in the actual product?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, I worked on a banking project where we used some structure. We didn't use this domain-driven design structure, but we used something similar. We didn't call it entities, we just call it models, and used these models to basically transform the data that's coming from the service to something that we want to process and use it on the front-end application. And if in that moment, if let's say that probably using DDD in that moment maybe will come out with benefits, but with some benefits. But of course, the structure that we used there, it's quite similar with DDD. But in the end, I used a lot of structures like MVC, which again, it's a structure that split the code in different sections. And yeah, on the smaller project, maybe DDD will not be a fit. Like I said, if you want to use DDD on a smaller project, it will be a waste of time because you need to understand the DDD, you need to talk with the business domains and get all this information from them and define all these kind of things like business language, everything from the beginning.
Okay, thank you for your input, Mihai. Bogdan actually did have a specific question on the demo you shared with us. And he is asking, probably the movie services deals with filtering the movies from the backend?
No, so the movie service that I use here, the service that I use here, I'm not doing any filtering. I'm just getting the information from the backend, from the service. But of course, you can have the filtering. You can have all the necessary actions that your application needs on the front-end side in that service. Of course, the actions related to the movies. If we are talking about other entity or other, let's say, models from the application and even domain, because we talk about bound context. Here, the movies part and the search, and this page, it's a bound context, and it's related to this specific section.
Okay, thank you. It seems that we don't have any more questions for you, Mihai. I guess it was very comprehensive to understand how we can use domain-driven design. Wait, we have a last-minute one. It just popped up. We have a question from Paul. How do you keep in sync the DTO from the backend with the DTO from the frontend? Or who dictates the structure, the backend or the frontend?
Okay, it seems that we have three questions here. So I will answer to the first one. In this moment, what I did was a manual structure. I didn't use any tool to generate the DTO from the backend. We have different tools that help us to generate from a Swagger file. We can generate the DTO, and we can use the same DTO on the backend side and also on the frontend side. In this way, you can keep both backend and frontend in sync. The second question is who dictates the structure?
Who dictates the structure, yes.
Here I'm saying that neither frontend or backend, the business team dictates the structure, because we are talking about domain-driven design. I told you that the business team need to be involved in the project from the beginning. In the business language, the model, and everything will need to be defined together with the business team. So in the end, the business team and the business people, the domain experts, are the ones that are defining the structure, not front-end, not back-end. Of course, we have some technical aspects in the structure, but those can be defined together with the business team. So it's a collaboration between all these three layers: front-end, back-end, and business.
Great, thank you for clearing that for us, Mihai, and thank you for sharing these great insights with us. We are closing this session. So, Mihai, if you want to say some closing arguments to your session.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for joining the call. And if you want to stay in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Just write me there, and we can connect and talk more about domain-driven design, about microfrontends, or any other subject that you have in mind. And don't forget to leave me a feedback. Like my colleagues before me, I have this QR code on the screen. So if you want, you can scan it and leave me a feedback there about my presentation. And thank you all for joining the program this week today.
Thank you again, Mihai. I hope everyone enjoyed the talk so far we had on our web day here at Programmers Week. It was great to be here with you and moderate these great talks we had so far. The next sessions will be hosted by my colleague Petrache Marin, who is a community lead in our web community. Continue to go beyond and enjoy this great day at Programmers Week. Thank you.